On July 16th, 1439, King Henry VI of England banned kissing. The exact wording of the ban seems to have been lost, but it was certainly a notable event in the long history of the human custom. Attitudes towards kissing, a very intimate act, say a lot about culture, people, and the times. To an extent, a history of kissing is a history of human interaction that deserves to be remembered.
Cheryl Kirschenbaum, a philematologist, that is, someone who studies the science of kissing, and science writer at Michigan State University, explains in her book, The Science of Kissing, What Our Lips Are Telling Us, that scientists are not exactly sure why we kiss. That's not to say that there aren't plenty of theories. Kirschenbaum mentions a couple. One argument is that kissing is a vestige of infant feeding behavior. Prior to jars of baby food, a mother would pre chew food for an infant and then transfer it into their mouth, and this developed the connection between kissing and affection. Alternatively, she suggests that kissing may have derived from the practice of smelling each other as a means of recognition. She admits that today, of course, blatant sniffing wouldn't go over well. Presumably, pre chewing food and spitting it into someone's mouth likewise would be frowned upon, especially on a first date. Neither of these seem particularly romantic explanations to offer up on a first date, but they aren't the least savory ideas. A 2024 article in the journal Evolutionary Anthropology suggests that the behavior was derived from hominid ancestors. The article, written by Dr. Adriano R. Lemira of the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom, is based on the behavior of great apes. Lemira writes, current comparative evidence suggests that kissing isn't a derived signal of affection in humans. It instead represents a surviving, devolved, vestigial form of primate grooming that conserved its ancestral form, context, and function. His theory of kissing? Great ape social behavior suggests that kissing is likely the conserved final mouth contact stage of a grooming bout when the groomer sucks with protruded lips the fur or skin of the groomed to latch onto debris or a parasite. The hygienic relevance of grooming decreased over human evolution due to fur loss, but shorter sessions would have predictably retained a final kissing stage, ultimately remaining the only vestige of a once ritualistic behavior for signaling and strengthening social and kinship ties in an ancestral ape. That is, he suggests that we learn to kiss by picking bugs off one another.
Romantic.
While these theories seek to explain why kissing may have first developed, the purpose served today would, of course, be much different. But some theories likely still apply today. In a September 2007 interview with the BBC, evolutionary psychologist Gordon G. Gallup Jr. of the University of Albany explained, kissing involves a very complicated exchange of information. Olfactory information, tactile information, and postural types of adjustments that may tap into underlying evolved and unconscious mechanisms that enable people to make determinations about the degree to which they are genetically incompatible. Kissing may even reveal the extent to which a partner is willing to commit to raising children, a central issue in long term relationships and one that is crucial to the survival of our species. Or, in other words, kissing is a way of, well, choosing a compatible partner.
But we actually might have a better idea of when kissing started than we do of why. Because while a kiss may be fleeting, there are ways to look for hard evidence of a soft kiss.
One possibility has to do with bacteria, specifically Methanobroctor oralis, a common part of the human microbiome associated with periodontal disease. A 2017 study published in the journal Nature looked at what the LA Times described as the first and oldest dental plaque to be genetically analyzed in the dental plaque of a Neanderthal tooth and found the bacteria. The author of the study, Laura Warwick, a paleomicrobiologist at the University of Adelaide in Australia, analyzed the number of mutations in the genome to estimate that it was introduced to Neanderthals around 120,000 years ago. That is, she noted to the Times, near the edge of the time period when humans and Neanderthals were interbreeding. About 1 to 4% of the DNA of people of Eurasian descent is Neanderthal in origin. One possible way that Neanderthals would have been introduced to the mouth bacteria of Homo sapiens could, of course, have been via kissing. That is, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens might have been snogging some 120,000 years ago. The problem is that there are other ways that the bacteria might have been introduced, including sharing a meal. A 2023 article in the journal Science also notes some prehistoric art. For example, the sculpture called the Ein Sacri Lovers, thought to have been created some 11,000 years ago, might imply that kissing was a thing in prehistory. But as with the Methanobribacter oralis, the evidence is less than certain. But we don't just have to look at bacteria, because another possible way to trace the origin of kissing is via a virus, specifically herpes simplex virus, or HSV. A study published in a 2022 edition of Science Advances looks at HSV1 genomes derived from dental material from human skeletons. Science magazine explains the authors discovered that there was a shift in dominant lineages of HSV1 in the Bronze Age, and they suggest that this shift occurred because of an additional route of lateral transmission of HSV1, potentially linked to the introduction of new cultural practices caused by migration, such as romantic sexual kissing. That is, kissing might have spread during the Bronze Age, somewhere between 3300 to 1200 BC, and with it spread herpes simplex 1, an oral infection still common today. Citing the first textual references to kissing as a Vedic Sanskrit manuscript from 1500 BC, the paper speculated that kissing developed in India and traveled back to the Mediterranean with Alexander the Great's troops. So once again, science takes the fun out of kissing. Was it transmitting viruses or was it transmitting bacteria?
Kiss me.
But NYT News Service noted in 2024 that in 2008, two researchers at the University of Copenhagen, with a shared interest in Assyriology, the study of ancient Assyria, have a different idea. The couple, Sophie Rasmussen and Troels Erbel, were familiar with writing in Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform that well predated the Sanskrit text. They found texts that mentioned kissing from around 2400 BC, or nearly 1,000 years older than the Sanskrit. Moreover, they argue the nature of the text suggests that kissing was already a common practice. The news service notes that these texts might be a surprise to philematologists, but they were not to Assyriologists. As much as Assyriologists like to argue amongst themselves, Assyriologist Gonzalo Rubio of Penn State University explains, they don't really talk to other people. Science magazine explains the implications. The sources from ancient Mesopotamia suggest that kissing in relation to sex, family, and friendship was an ordinary part of everyday life in central parts of the ancient Middle East from the late 3rd millennium BCE onward. Accordingly, kissing should not be regarded as a custom originating exclusively in any single region and spreading from there. Furthermore, the sources from Mesopotamia show that the romantic sexual kiss was known far earlier and in a wider geographic area than the references from India dated to 1500 BC, which stands in contrast to previous observations about the history of kissing. Although some societies may not have practiced the romantic sexual kiss, it must have been known in most ancient cultures, which could be indicative of a near universality. While this doesn't give a definitive date of the first kiss, it does suggest that kissing is largely contemporary with and common in ancient civilizations, although the practice may have gone back even further. But more than the when, the texts tell us something about the culture. Rubio notes that in the portrayals of the act of kissing in Sumerian literature, the subjects have sexual intercourse first and only afterwards do they kiss. It's afterplay of some sort rather than foreplay. Moreover, the Washington Post writes, enjoying a romantic kiss outside the confines of marriage appears to have been frowned upon by the Mesopotamians. Arbol and Rasmussen came across the story of a married woman almost led astray by a kiss from another man. Worse, kissing someone who was not supposed to be sexually active, such as a priestess, they write, was said to deprive the kisser of the ability to speak. Given the connection with bacteria and viruses, the Post writes, such prohibitions may have had the unintended benefit of protecting the good health of the kiss deprived. Still, Arbol and Rasmussen, who are married and assumedly kiss, have a rather more romantic explanation for the role that kissing plays. The Post writes, kissing may have allowed couples to bond and strengthen their relationship, and of course also for sexual arousal, says Rasmussen. So when you want to mate and pass on your genes, it's very convenient. Lemiera notes that different cultures kept different rules and conventions regarding kissing. Few natural human signals carry the symbolism and social sanctions of kissing. Cultural conventions across history and civilizations have dictated for at least 4,500 years how close affection can be publicly shown and privately demonstrated. Who can kiss, where one can kiss, when, how, and how many times. For example, Romans had several types of kisses that played different roles. The osculum, a kiss on the cheek signifying social or familiar affection without romantic implications, also used as a sign of politeness. The basium, a kiss on the lips, signifying closer relationship between close family members or lovers but without sexual meaning. And the savium, a kiss on the lips, signifying erotic or sexual desire between romantic partners. But for such a kissing culture, what might have been also the first kissing ban occurred in Rome, when Emperor Tiberius outlawed kissing in public ceremonies for 23 years to stop the spread of a fungal infection that affected facial hair. And rules are still applied today. Lamiere writes that today in Latin Europe, two left right cheek to cheek kisses may be used as a greeting between women and cross sex, but not between men. They shake hands, unless they are of close kinship or doing special ceremonies like a funeral. But strong differences exist between regions, social strata, and/or contexts. For example, kisses may be totally averted in professional settings, and initiated mobsters of the same mafia family might kiss each other. The existence of these rules regulating kissing implies, he argues, that kissing is imbued with an underlying universal biological meaning that crosses cultures, hinting at an evolutionary basis older than the cultural conventions themselves. But that might not necessarily be true. Researchers William Jankowiak, Justin Garcia, and Shelley Volsch noted in a 2016 edition of the anthropology magazine Sapiens that to go by today's popular Western culture, you would think the romantic kiss is a pleasurable human universal. Many people, including evolutionary and social psychologists, have suggested as much. It seems a natural conclusion. Even chimpanzees and bonobos kiss, including with open mouths and tongues. But clearly not everyone kisses. In fact, in our recent study, published in July 2015, less than half of the cultures we sampled engaged in the romantic kiss. Well, they note that at least 90% of today's cultures have kissing of one type or another. They also write that the majority of those it's just parents kissing their children. So why do some cultures kiss romantically and others do not? Their ethnographic study of who kisses was published in the 2015 edition of American Anthropologist. Their general finding was that there's a strong correlation between the frequency of the romantic sexual kiss and a society's relative social complexity. The more socially complex the culture, the higher frequency of romantic sexual kissing. That says something about the role of kissing in culture and history. Foraging or hunter gatherer societies, which the authors argue may serve as a window into societies of the distant past, tend not to kiss. They note that when the South African Tonga peoples first saw Europeans kissing in 1890, their reaction was disgust at such gross behavior. By contrast, they write, there's a strong link between kissing and social complexity. This may have to do with things such as increased free time, but they write, it's also possible that as societies stratify into different layers and social classes, their behavior stratifies too. If you have aristocracy and peasants, you might also have polite cheek kissing and more intimate mouth to mouth for different classes or circumstances. That suggests that kissing is not so much biology as it is culture. Kissing may be an essential part of regulating society. And thus, how kissing was used can be seen as a historical marker of culture. Medievalist Dr. Christine Axon of St. John's University of Queens, New York, explains about how kissing was seen in the European Middle Ages. The kiss in history went far beyond its modern association with love in all its forms. Indeed, most public kisses involved men kissing other men for reasons that had little or nothing to do with sentiment. Multifaceted, the kiss could represent honor, loyalty, legality, veneration, adoration, passion, treachery, and opportunities for misbehavior. She gives examples of the cultural importance of kissing. In the epic poem Beowulf, Danish king Hrothgar kisses Beowulf and embraces his neck after he slew the Grendel. And of course, in the Christian faith, Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. Notably, she explains, kissing was considered a vital component of a standard homage or commendation ceremony in which lords and vassals pledged mutual loyalty. After pledging loyalty to a monarch, the vassals would complete the ritual with a kiss. In fact, romantic kissing may have stemmed from there, as the ritual of the groom kissing the bride might have served a similar purpose. The romantic kiss of courtly love may also have served that purpose, as she explains. Within a courtly love context, the kiss was the ultimate gift that a lady could bestow upon her lover. Alongside the overtly sensual and eroticism, the romantic kiss also acts as a promise of fidelity, broken only at the lover's peril. Kissing was also an important part of religion. She writes, bishops bestowed the holy kiss upon recipients of sacraments like baptism, penitential absolution, and ordination. Christians kiss relics, icons, episcopal rings, and the liturgical pacts, a board decorated with sacred imagery that was offered before parishioners received communion. In Mecca, in imitation of Muhammad, Muslims kissed the holy relic of the black stone. Jewish worshippers at synagogue kissed the mantle of the Torah. In each case, the mouth communicated reverence and humility. On the other hand, the sort of casual kissing that we might engage in today was presented differently. As the acme of pleasure, she writes, the kiss often resulted in downfall or death. For example, she notes a case of the tragic tale of Abelard and Heloise. He writes, with our books open before us, we exchanged more words of love than of lessons, more kisses than concepts. Enervated by the love spawned from these kisses, Abelard's famously brilliant lectures grew lukewarm and slack, and of course their love, driven by kisses rather than study, came to a tragic end. In bawdy tales, kissing often ended in comic failure. For example, in Chaucer's The Miller's Tale, where the miller's desire for a kiss ends up with him accidentally kissing the wrong end of the object of his desire. And this gives context to the rule made by Henry VI. The reason for his ban was the spread of the Black Plague, which had seen a resurgence in England after the Great Famine of 1438. While germ theory was a long way off, medieval people had at least a basic understanding that the plague could be spread by contact. The law actually came at the petition of Parliament to preserve both the health and welfare of the people and of the king himself. The largest concern didn't seem to be that snogging peasants would spread the plague so much as nobles swearing fealty might pass it to the king. Parliament had to argue that the oath of fealty would still be binding, even without a kiss. But there was another purpose for the ban as well, as the website History Skills explains. Beyond the immediate health concerns, church authorities were keen on maintaining a moral order within society. Kissing, especially in public, was perceived as an act that could breach the boundaries of decency and propriety. The prohibition was in part an attempt to uphold a certain moral standard and to curb behaviors deemed inappropriate or lascivious. The kissing ban served as a tool for reinforcing both religious and royal authority and regulating public behavior, demonstrating the extent to which the ruling powers could intervene in the private lives of individuals. The rule regarding kissing thus represented both the science and the culture of the times, as did the ban's failure, History Skills writes. Some members of society accepted the prohibition as a necessary measure to curb the spread of disease and maintain moral order. Others, however, viewed the ban as an infringement on personal freedoms and an overreach of authority. Acts of defiance and secret kissing became expressions of resistance as individuals sought to navigate the boundaries between compliance and rebellion. In reality, the ban was almost impossible to enforce consistently. The authorities couldn't be everywhere at once, and as a result, few people were punished for non-compliance, and after a while, the law was no longer enforced. Kissing representing both authority and rebellion. A 2024 article in Psychology Today notes that a century and a half after the ban, the kiss was still seen as a subversive way to undermine authority. The Kiss of Romeo and Juliet, written in the 1590s, is emblematic of this movement, which sought to remove courtship from the purview of family and society and celebrate romantic love as a liberating, self-determining, and potentially subversive force. Society took some time to embrace the kiss. Washington Post columnist Eva Glickman writes that from the first days in North America, church reformers were forever forbidding kissing. A favorite Puritan sermon concerned a Boston mariner condemned to 2 hours in the public stocks as punishment for kissing his wife on his doorstep after returning home from 3 years at sea. Post-World War I Hollywood codes only allowed dry screen kisses with no more than 3 seconds. Film portrayals loosened with time, but kissing still faced backlash. As late as the summer of 1969, the town of Swedesboro, New Jersey, passed a law banning kissing in public because the acting police chief said, "We don't want any hanky-panky around here."
Today, most Western societies seem to be generally accepting of public displays of affection like public kissing, but it really does depend upon location and context, even in Western nations. And of course, kissing in public can lead to jail time in places like Dubai. And it's still related to the times. Many locations at least tried to discourage kissing during the COVID pandemic to prevent transmission of the illness, with one particular 2020 statement by the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada suggesting that you should avoid kissing and any face-to-face contact, and in fact should consider wearing a mask that covers your nose and mouth even while having intercourse. Seems like rules about kissing are still used to structure society. And while the days of the kissing ban might not necessarily be over, I think we can all agree that people will still continue to go on kissing. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support the History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from the History Guy on Cameo.